was alone, falling free, trying my best not to forget.
A nuclear doctrine basically gives guidelines and principles for when a country might use nuclear weapons. It covers both peacetime and wartime situations, helping them decide when it's okay to use those weapons. When a country has nukes and a clear doctrine, it's like they're telling everyone that the country is not to be trifled with. It lets them show their commitment to protect their interests and make it clear what will happen if someone tries to nuke them. The doctrine also helps with decision-making, command and control, and lays out rules for using nukes if there's a threat or aggression against the country's security. Now, the flexibility of a nuclear doctrine can vary depending on the specific country and their doctrine. Take the US for example. Their doctrine has this thing called flexible response, which means they can respond differently depending on how severe the threat is. So, they can use non-nuclear options and stuff to deter or respond to different levels of aggression. It gives them more choices. How effective is India's nuclear doctrine? Before we discuss whether or not India's nuclear doctrine is successful, let's see why India went nuclear. There are a bunch of reasons why India decided to go for nuclear weapons. One of them was to balance the power and counter China and Pakistan's nuclear capabilities. India was not happy with the global non-proliferation regime, especially the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Plus, India needed nuclear energy too. Some people say that India's nuclear test in 1974 was aimed at Pakistan and China. But in my opinion, it had broader implications. Because, during the Cold War from the 1960s to the 1980s, the geopolitical situation was very different. There were moments when the United States and the Soviet Union seriously considered using nuclear weapons. Take the Berlin crisis, for example. The US deployed bombers capable of carrying nukes and threatened a nuclear strike if the Soviets interfered with access to West Berlin. And the Cuban Missile Crisis was even more intense. It brought the US and the Soviet Union incredibly close to a nuclear confrontation. The US threatened military action, and the Soviet Union warned of a possible nuclear response. Then there was the Able Archer 83 incident. The US did a NATO military exercise called Able Archer, simulating going from regular to nuclear warfare. But the Soviets totally misread it and thought it might be a surprise nuclear attack. They put their forces on high alert, which made things super tense. And the NATO's flexible response policy, which involved the development of tactical nuclear weapons and the willingness to use them to counter a Soviet conventional attack. The tremors of these confrontations were felt, even in New Delhi. During India's standoff with Pakistan in 1971, President Richard Nixon and his National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger actually discussed a nuclear strike. Nixon favored Pakistan, and his racism and sexism towards India led him to ignore the genocidal actions of the Pakistani military in what is now Bangladesh.
The most unattractive women in the world are the Indian women. Undoubtedly. I've never seen one. Oh, I've seen them. Most sexless, nuts people. I mean, people say, what about the black Africans? Well, you can see something of vitality there. I mean, they have a little animal-like charm. But God, those Indians, apathetic.
He became frustrated by India's UN motion condemning the US war in Vietnam. He had long wanted to settle his score with Indira Gandhi. Even the United States considered using nuclear weapons against China to defend India in the 1960s. However, there were internal debates about this option. Some feared it would be seen as racist after the atomic bombings of Japan, and there were doubts about why the US should defend India when its former colonial ruler, the United Kingdom, did not. So yeah, it was a tense situation, and discussions about using nuclear weapons made countries like China and India very uncomfortable. The end of the Cold War marked a significant reduction in the nuclear threat and a decrease in the likelihood of a large-scale nuclear conflict between major powers. The presence of nuclear weapons in some regions still posed challenges to global security. The nuclear doctrine of India can be referred to as comprehensive strategic deterrence. It emphasizes a combination of offensive and defensive capabilities to deter potential adversaries and ensure its national security. India's position on nuclear weapons has been consistent ever since the country gained its independence. The nuclear-armed states have made no headway towards disarming, despite years of international discussions on the topic. Then, out of the blue, in 1998, India conducted a series of nuclear tests, declaring itself a nuclear-capable state.
At 15:45 hours, India conducted 3 underground nuclear tests in the Pokhran Lake.
But here's the thing, India had already acquired the ability to assemble nuclear weapons and develop delivery systems, including missiles and aircraft, well before the 1998 tests. India came up with this nuclear doctrine in 1999. It says they'll only use the weapon if someone attacks them first with nukes. A no first use policy. They'll hit back hard to cause maximum damage, but they won't use nukes on countries that don't have them. But here's the catch. If a country attacks India with chemical or biological weapons, they might just go ahead and use nukes as retaliation even if the attacking state does not possess nuclear weapons. India follows the concept of credible minimum deterrence in its nuclear doctrine. It aims to deter potential adversaries from initiating a nuclear attack by maintaining the fewest number of deliverable weapons necessary for this purpose. India's nuclear doctrine does not define minimum in terms of specific numbers or types of nuclear weapons. The focus is on dissuading the enemy rather than seeking parity with another nuclear power. It was clarified by the National Security Advisor, Brajesh Mishra, that India does not seek parity with China, but rather a minimum deterrent. To ensure the effectiveness of minimum deterrence, India emphasizes the establishment of a highly reliable intelligence and early warning system. Additionally, a robust communication system is crucial for coordinating responses among key institutions. India's nuclear forces and command and control systems are designed for high survivability against surprise attacks and the capability for a rapid punitive response. The credibility of India's minimum deterrent capability is further enhanced by its triad system, which allows for a second strike capability. This communicates to adversaries that India has the resolve and determination to retaliate in the event of a first nuclear use. No first use policy. India follows the no first use policy for several reasons. The NFU strategy portrays India as a restrained nuclear power, which helps establish a positive image and diplomatic advantage. A restrained nuclear weapons program without tactical nuclear weapons, and complex command and control systems is economically feasible and provides an affordable deterrent. India's NFU policy rejects the concept of nuclear warfighting and focuses on peace and stability rather than engaging in an arms race with other countries. The NFU policy offers military strategic advantages by reassuring countries and fostering confidence-building measures. Implementing an NFU could potentially reduce nuclear risks and increase prospects for peace in the subcontinent. India's NFU strategy avoids the need for a nuclear arsenal on high-alert deployment, preventing brinkmanship in early conflicts. The NFU policy allows for a more relaxed and secure command and control system, providing greater political control over nuclear forces. Rapid response capabilities often require delegating authority to lower command levels, which can limit flexibility in war plans. During the Cold War, the US had limited options in its nuclear war plans, risking total nuclear war or ignoring the plans altogether. By avoiding launch-on-warning posture and enabling greater political control, the NFU policy promotes stability and safety without compromising deterrence capabilities. The no first-use policy has been successful for India, and as long as their second strike capability remains intact, there's no need to shift to a first-use stance. Command and control. The effectiveness of a nuclear force depends on its command and control capabilities during crises. An elaborate command and control structure is essential for a viable strategy of nuclear deterrence. In India, the Prime Minister leads the National Command Authority and holds the authority to release nuclear weapons. Given India's constitutional system, the ultimate decision-making responsibility lies with the Prime Minister. Unilateral Moratorium on Testing. After the 1998 nuclear tests, the Indian scientific community deemed further testing unnecessary. Prime Minister Vajpayee declared a unilateral moratorium on nuclear testing to reinforce India's commitment to global nuclear disarmament. While some have questioned the need for self-imposed testing moratorium, India's scientific community is convinced of its nuclear weapons capability. However, considering future security needs and technological advancements, some argue for the necessity of testing to safeguard national interests. Despite not signing the discriminatory treaty on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, India has demonstrated responsible nuclear behavior, adhering to self-imposed restrictions and deter potential adversaries, which helps reduce concerns internationally. For instance, unlike North Korea, the Western world doesn't condemn India's ballistic missile tests. India's diplomatic engagement and strategic relationships with various countries, including Western nations, have fostered understanding, trust, and confidence in its nuclear program. India's nuclear posture and doctrine successfully convey its position on nuclear weapons to its neighbors in the Western world, emphasizing their defensive rather than threatening nature. However, there are two crucial questions the doctrine doesn't address. First, what if non-state actors launch an attack? Will India target the country hosting these actors? Second, while the doctrine says no nukes against non-nuclear states, it retains the option of nuclear retaliation in a major attack involving biological or chemical weapons. But how do they define a major attack using these weapons? It's challenging to identify the perpetrator, whether state or non-state actors, especially if there's assistance from other countries. The doctrine does not provide explicit clarity on this scenario.